Сьогодні продовжуємо ще в грудні початку розмову з адвокатом Данилом Білаком, канадцем, який тепер на посаді в адміністрації прем'єр-міністра України, про правдивий поступ у різних сферах державного і громадського життя в Україні.
Ідеї, зусилля, успіх. Спонсоровані Українською кредитовою спілкою. Добрий вечір, дорогі глядачі. Нині маємо велику честь і приємність вітати пана Данила Білака, який останньо отримав цікаву нову працю, яка переглядає інвестиції України чи прем'єра-міністра. Вітаємо, пане Данило.
Дякую.
Now, Danilo, you mentioned these four major sectors. Could you maybe get into a little bit more about high tech? That seems to be maybe a sexy type issue. And what's Ukraine's position there? Everybody speaks quite positively about that.
Well, this is actually, thank you for that question, because it's actually part of the overall perspective of rebranding Ukraine, if you like. So that when you hear the word Ukraine, you don't think of corruption and conflict. You think of high tech, you think of agri-tech, you think of high technology being married to agriculture, to a dynamic young country where all the young kids these days, they all speak English. They're all very tech savvy. They have a completely different worldview than their parents did. And these are the kinds of things that we want to get across to people. I met with a delegation from the Kuwait Investment Authority. This is the Kuwaiti government's sovereign wealth fund. The Gulf states, the Arab countries, are extremely interested in investing in Ukraine because their big issue is food security. And so they are very keen to invest not just in growing and sowing and harvesting and shipping, but they're interested in the whole value chain that agribusiness represents, which has not been realized yet. So you can take high tech and marry it with agribusiness, for example, and you go beyond, tractors with GPS, and you go into food processing, you go into farm manufacturing, farm equipment manufacturing, you get into agricultural lending, and there's this whole spectrum of the value chain that really represents Ukraine's future. Our two main assets in Ukraine are human capital and land. And putting those two together will make Ukraine a powerhouse for the future and will be plugged into the global supply chain. If you look at where high tech is today, people think of IT. And that's okay. I mean, because we have a big IT sector, it's probably the third largest export that we have, is the technologies, the outsourcing, but it's also platform building, etc. But IT is one part of the story. High tech is much broader. It's nanotechnologies, it's microtechnologies, it's revitalizing R&D. Microsoft and Google have major R&D sectors, research and development sectors in Ukraine, not just, farming out, do some coding for me type of thing. And we have an aerospace industry. We have aerospace engineers. We have some of the most educated people in the world when it comes to this engineering technology aspect. And that is now being applied more and more into agriculture, into energy savings. The government just announced a huge energy savings, energy efficiency rather, opportunity and a program in order to get Ukrainians to save more. We were the biggest gas and heat wasters in the world. There was nobody that wasted more energy than Ukraine did. And now people are starting to put new windows into their houses, put the new coatings on the front of their buildings, and rebuilding the infrastructure, the energy infrastructure, so that you don't have block heating anymore, that you have lichilniki, the thermostats in everybody's homes. So the high tech is actually, it's a way to keep our brains in the country too. The drain to Poland is just massive. I'm a senator of Ukrainian Catholic University, and I see the statistics. This past year, twice as many Ukrainian students went to Poland to study than did last year. That's 50,000. So from 25,000 to 50,000, next year could be double that. The Poles are giving full stipends, they're paying the freight, everybody had to come on over, because their top people are going to Germany, to Britain, to other places. They have a deficit. And the best place to take them are Ukrainians. Any Ukrainian can learn Polish in 3 months, and then they promise you on graduation a job and an EU passport. Very compelling. Hopefully that, our relationship with the EU is going to move forward with visa liberalization now early in the new year. But the Prime Minister, his overriding objective is to stimulate economic growth. And without foreign direct investment, you cannot have economic growth. We don't have enough inside the country right now. Ukrainian businesses are essentially cannibalizing each other. There's just not enough to spread around. We need to have that external funding in order to bring in, and it's not just giving money. It's not like, you have to look at the quality of the investment as well. We want a modern technology. We want new management skills. We want to train our workers to become members of the global supply chain. It's not sweat labor. So this issue is very important, that we create the economy that will draw these people back who have gone abroad and who will now have skill sets that will be part of this building process, and to provide good, solid, high-paying jobs for Ukrainians to stay in Ukraine. And that's a big challenge. I feel the pressure. I feel it every week when I meet with the Prime Minister and we run through where this investment is coming from. And it's very difficult because Ukraine is still very toxic in the minds of a lot of investors. And we need to change the narrative by pointing out the things and continuing to do the reforms. I mean, the government is not sitting back on its laurels and saying, well, we've done all of this, it's all of this, we deserve credit. You don't deserve anything. Nobody's going to give Ukraine anything. And I think that is one of the shifts that I've seen in the last year, is that you have a very strong sense that, okay, we're basically on our own. The events in the United States and in some countries in Europe, etc., there's a very strong sense that we have to do this on our own. And we have to be responsible. Ukraine has to be responsible for its own future. And not to put too fine a point on it, finding that foreign direct investment is a matter of national security. Because if it doesn't come in, then we will not have the money to provide for an army. And the security as part of the budget is 5% of GDP. That's higher than almost any country, certainly in Europe, but it's Israeli scale GDP allocation. But then we can't have the communications. We're in the middle of a cyber war with the Russians. They just brought down the servers of the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of the Pension Fund, and the State Treasury. And those viruses have been basically traced back. And reports have been coming out recently about what's been going on in Ukraine and elsewhere. So there are really strong forces that want to see us fail. And it's only by consolidating inside the country and getting people behind the reform program and actually explaining to Ukrainians what's happening. Natalie Oresko had a very good comment when she said that her government that she was part of, greatest accomplishment was macroeconomic stabilization, which is true. It saved the country. We're now going to see 1.2% or 1.3% GDP growth this year, albeit from a very low level. But it's the first time we've seen that after this collapse of 30% of GDP over the past 2 years. And we're looking at 2 to 3% growth. But for the people to actually feel that change, to feel that stabilization, they've become poorer since 2013. To feel that things are changing, we need double-digit growth. We need, 10, 11, 12% growth a year. And that's $7, $8, $9 billion a year. I gave myself a target of $1 billion of unlocked investment. That means a combination of investors who are in Ukraine already who are prepared to invest more, and new investors that are coming into the market. You have to give yourself a stretch target in order to achieve things in life. But $1 billion for a country of Ukraine's wealth and size should be easy to do. I was in Dubai last week, in December, and it just blew my mind. I mean, you have this incredibly modern, it's not even modern, it's futuristic city. It's sitting on the desert. It has nothing. It doesn't even have the oil. Abu Dhabi has the oil. They have nothing. And they built a phenomenal port. They created all of the conditions to make people stop in Dubai. It's a major logistics hub. It's a major financial services hub. It's a major tourism hub. But they had to create all of that because there was no reason to go to Dubai. None. Zero. Historically, commercially, it didn't exist. Ukraine is very rich. Maybe Ukraine is too rich for its own good because we didn't have to. Israelis the same way. Shimon Peres, who is passed away recently, and he was the father of the innovation nation. And in the 70s, the Israelis took a decision that they were going to really start to innovate because they also inherited a desert. And yet they are one of the major agricultural powerhouses in that region. They're basically growing fruits and vegetables and having a processing plants, etc., out of sand. And it's because they had to innovate. They had to innovate their irrigation, etc. So if we can import some of that technology, marry it with the technologies and assets, the brains that we have in Ukraine already, I mean, Ukraine can certainly have all of the potential to become a regional powerhouse, but it can become a major global economic player as well.
Дякуємо вам, що ви до нас
Дякую.
загостили, і продовжуємо,
Спасибі.
проведемо далі після перерви до дальшої програми.